Hi, welcome back to Dargon GM. Today, Nate and I are going to be talking about building culture with your players. So sit back, grab a drink and a snack, and join us.
Hello, I'm Nate. I'm going to be talking with Chris today about her people, and we're going to build her culture up. So basically, I'm going to be flinging out questions for her to think about, and then she's going to tell me what she thinks about, and I'll offer a few advice or opinions every once in a while if she needs it. But mostly, this is going to be watching a player build their own group of people in another DM's game. So I guess the first thing I want to ask about is actually just explain your people first. I think that's probably the easiest way. That way people know what we're doing.
Okay, so my character is Shae, and she's a druid huntress. Her people are, we've talked about this a little bit in other videos, her people are kind of loosely based on a Native American kind of culture. They're semi-nomadic. They are hobbits, and or halflings, depending on how you prefer to call them, and they live in a tribe, and their village is well, their village was built into the trees. We've recently moved, but their homes, you know, similar to what you'd see in the Shire, but built into like the roots and the bases of trees. What else do you want me to touch on?
I think that's good enough for now, and then we can talk about it and expand upon it. So this village size, you said that they would grow or they would move around. So I guess the first question is, how big is it?
So I'm thinking it's 75 to 150 people at any given time. Small enough to be able to pick up and move around easily. Big enough to be very self-sufficient and to have kind of all the professions that they would need represented. Things like, you know, tanners and potters or basket weavers, probably basket weavers, and you know, hunters and healers, all those things, druids.
So that profession line then, does that mean, does it kind of stay in a family line like how you see in other larger cultures, or does people just kind of move around, they all learn how to do everything and maybe change?
I think there'd be a lot of both. I think there would be some family passing down, like Shae is learning the healing arts from her mother, and she's the main healer of the village. So Shae's learning a lot, but others would either learn other things because maybe some things would be, I think some things would be small enough. I mean, you have to have your general laborers and stuff too, so learning every job would make sense. And then we talked a little bit, I think there'd be a little bit of fostering going on too. You know, they'd have a meeting of multiple hobbit groups, you know, like a jamboree or a powwow kind of thing. Maybe probably not every year, but maybe every third year or something, and they would do exchanges at that point, so that the village is always kept well rounded as far as having its needs met. And if there's something new that's been identified that they need, they'd be able to learn from another tribe who has that skill, like maybe pottery, and then, you know, those people would return and they'd be able to start that. Or maybe it's an interest that somebody has that they want to learn and it's not offered in the village. So,
And then take it back and spread it with their people as well.
yeah.
Makes sense. You're kind of sharing
Right.
skills. That way it kind of allows for the continuation of the hobbits.
Exactly. And that also provides opportunity for marriage, for things to happen to keep the genetic diversity there as well.
So marriage, how does that exactly work? Does that mean if let's say a female goes to a new hobbit home and she decides to marry one of the males there, does she take him back to her old place, or does she stay with him?
I don't see them as being having a specific you know, matriarchy or patriarchy. Probably just depend. If, you know, I think if that person went there to learn something that their village really needed, they would probably not stay at the village they were fostered at. They would probably try to, go back to their home to provide that, to fill that niche. So I think there'd just be a lot of negotiating and deciding, but I don't think it would be like the women always returning home or the men always, return home. I think it'd just be worked out as a couple, what's best for each tribe. And, maybe some of that would even be because, it stands to reason if you spend a lot of time with a specific group training with them, that might be who you meet your special person, might be somebody in that same group. And so that might be some of it. It could be too that maybe there's some other niche that they're filling, so who knows? But I don't think there'd be a hard and fast rule that the women always go or the men always go. I think it'd just be very balanced, and therefore keeping all the tribes very healthy with the genetic diversity that I already mentioned, and also having that balance of gender, not having all your women leave your tribe or whatever to go marry elsewhere.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
I like that. So actually 2 questions kind of regarding both. Well, not regarding both. One is actually regarding, so you said that maybe the Hobbit village would be about 150 people, and that really isn't enough to hold a very strong, stimulated economy that actually runs off a monetary system. So what do they use for trade? What is their currency?
Right. So they would do a lot of bartering. They are hunters and gatherers. They are living off the land. They do agriculture. Shae's father is a brewer and runs the tavern. So there'd be some money coming in and out, but not a lot, and most things would be in trade. So from the very earliest inception of their tribe, I pictured them for their winter grounds, which would be down in the lower lands, being on a route where people would be stopping all the time. So I could see different trade caravans and stuff going through, maybe in exchange for lodging for the night, or trading furs and provisions, and that kind of up in the mountains too. So that it would stand to reason that they would have people coming through who maybe had been on the road for a while, right? It seems like there's not a lot of villages around hers, but you've got the city of Barstone not too far away. So there'd be a lot of commerce going back and forth. So they'd have an opportunity to meet and trade a lot of stuff. So I think that, trading her father's brews, trading, like I said, furs and meats and provisions, medicinal stuff that her mom makes. Her mom makes salves and different things for healing. All that kind of stuff. So I see a lot of bartering going on, which has led to a funny aspect for Shae, right? She's always trying to barter, and her charisma is actually really low, and she has spent most of her time more as a survivalist out in nature, doing her druid thing and studying nature. And so she's seen other people do it, but she doesn't really have a knack for it. So she's always trying to barter, but she's not really good at it. So it's been a fun quirk for her. She's missed out on a lot there. But yeah, so I think bartering, they'd be a major bartering society. They'd have some money, but money wouldn't be nearly as important to them when they can get almost everything they need from the land all the time.
How often or how common is it for them to leave home then too?
I don't think they leave home much at all. So I think the fact that Shae's off adventuring is pretty rare, aside from the fostering. But even when they go to foster, they're going to this big thing, the whole tribe's going, and then they're maybe leaving with a different tribe. But once they're there, they're all probably pretty self-contained. Now, it could be that some of the tribe members, when they're fostered, may go to a community that does more interacting and getting out. But for Shae, her people, they pretty much keep to themselves. And it'd be hard not to, because they're they go in the summer, they follow the herds and they go up into the mountains. They're now where there aren't a lot of people. And and then they'd be busy all winter, right? Trying to You know, they'd be busy when they arrived at their winter grounds trying to prepare all the things they hunted and gathered on the way for storage, you know, making jerky and things like that, preserving things. So I don't see them moving around a lot. Plus, being winter, you wouldn't want to travel in winter typically. So I don't think they'd get out much. You'd have
So
your rare hobbit who really has that wanderlust that might wander off to the city or do something. In fact, one of Shae's brothers has done exactly that, right? He has a shop in the city of Barstone.
yep, traders actually. He's a barter, so that makes sense. So we're talking about a lot of how they were. How do you think them moving to a new island, which I will kind of explain quickly, basically they made a deal. They had to leave where their home or their place at because there was a great evil there that was spreading across. The hobbits didn't feel like they could do a whole lot against it, probably rightfully so. So they decided to move someplace new. They went to a place where they knew that there was a god that many of them worshipped was, you know, at least watching over. So they decided to take this trip across to this island, which is now a tropical island. It has a great position for trade, especially since they're so close to a very large trading center. So them being in this new tropical island with this new access to people, materials, and a whole different way of life, and also including, now that they're moving here, other groups of people, including humans and other hobbits, have taken an interest in moving there with them. How do you think this would change the size of it? Do you think it would change the monetary system they had? Do you think it'll change some of the morals and ethics?
I think it's going to be a major change. I think it may be gradual and it may take time, but I see this as being a real move that'll cause change for them. From everything from the way they live, as far as their homes, how they build their homes, and what their homes look like and feel like, to I think they still won't travel a lot, but I think commerce and actual money, currency will become more important to them as well, I think. So right off the bat, before they even left on the ships to leave, they made a deal with the monarchs in Far Harbor, which is the major port city that Nate mentioned. And they made a deal that they would work on trading exotic fruits, getting exotic fruits to the people of Far Harbor. So right away, they know that they have to start doing trade in a different way. And so they have that. And then being a tropical place, I think that the style home that they live in now, that they were used to living in, built into the trees, into the roots, and sort of into the ground. I don't think those would be the best thing for a tropical
Potentially
island.
dangerous.
Especially what?
That says could be potentially dangerous.
Yeah, it very well could be, because I think they're going to have to deal with. I assume that there's going to be weather events, maybe monsoons or tropical hurricanes and things like that could be a possibility. I think flooding could be a problem, and because I think where we are right now, where we landed, is probably relatively flat. So you don't have those like rolling hills and where the forests are going up into the mountains, the foothills and stuff to build the homes into. So now that means if you're building into the roots under trees, you're in a hole that's below sea level, potentially. So I could see flooding being a real problem. And I think also air circulation would be a problem, where before it made for a cozy environment that kept them warm in the winter, and probably cool in the summer. I think in their environment, it wouldn't breathe well enough. So we're already talking about, well, gosh, how would they build their houses then? And I think we're looking at tree houses. I think we're looking at houses, if you've ever seen pictures of like Bora Bora in Tahiti, where you see the huts that are out on the water on docks and they kind of float and move. I think we're looking at that sort of thing. Nate and I have already talked a lot about the fact that I think that they're going to need to build appear. Maybe they even brought the materials with them from Far Harbor when they first landed. The whole village hasn't arrived yet, but a few went ahead.
The brave and the young.
Yeah, so I think there'd be that needing to happen almost immediately, and that's going to set them up for a little more trade. And then, of course, because everything's different, I'm sure that what they can grow, what they can gather, everything's going to be different, and there's going to be a learning curve for them. And so I think there's going to be a lot more trading things to get things that are more familiar from home, and then learning how to use stuff. So we've already taught. I think that they're going to end up spreading out more. I don't think it's going to be as cohesive a village. So you take those 150 or so people, and suddenly they're spread pretty thin into smaller groups. Maybe some out in areas where agriculture is better, closer to, there's a river on the island that we've already had to interact with, and then maybe some things out closer to the beach where they're going to have to, I'm sure, do fishing and be set up to trade when ships come in and out. So I see a lot of change. I see a lot of change for these people as a result of this move.
So let's go back to that before they changed. Before they really started going to the island, what would have been their main moral ethics? What would have been taboo for them? And also, what would be some just common things and common, colloquials that they'd end up saying as a group of people?
I don't know if I have any colloquialisms for them yet, but they're definitely, when you think of, for instance, Southern hospitality, that's how I see the hobbits. I see them as these happy-go-lucky, friendly people, and in their home village on the mainland, they were always very welcoming of visitors. That won't change, and in fact, it'll become a bigger key, right? Because they're going to have to grow, and there's going to be other people that want to. There's already been some people that are not hobbits that have come with them on the initial trip to settle on this island. I'm sure there'll be more of that happening, and as the corruption spreads on the mainland, there could be others that come still later. So I think the diversity is going to become greater, and I think the village sizes are going to become a lot bigger. But I think maybe her home tribe is going to have to absorb a lot of people too. So it's going to become, more of a melting pot, maybe. So I think that hospitality is always important to them, being friendly. Maybe other things will emerge as we play along. I haven't thought about colloquialisms or anything yet. We haven't spent enough time on the island either for me to have thought of anything yet.
Is there any great taboos that maybe that they would excommunicate members of their own or even kill them if they did that? Or is there anything that would really make them mad that maybe other groups of people would do?
I think some of the typical things that you would expect from any society, murder is probably going to be a pretty big taboo for them. And I think because of where they are right now and the fact they have to stick together even more because it's an unknown place and there's unknown dangers, I think disloyalty to the tribe or to the people that live there, not necessarily just, not a racial thing, not a you're from my tribe, so therefore I have to be loyal to just you, but being loyal to the community. So I think disloyalty to the community might result in some sort of exile, but I think it'd have to be pretty extreme and I don't think it'd be like the first time you screwed up unless it was a really extreme circumstance. And I think any maybe deception and things, which are things that they really haven't had to deal with as a community before. But I think as you bring in more people, you're gonna have to let other people lead and be in control besides just people from your tribe, right? If you are absorbing people from other communities and nations, and then you have to incorporate them into your government, your elders. Like, so I think things would shape as those different cultures come together, and there might be some growing pains along the way of, you know, adjusting to other people's customs. But I think that, and maybe there's something there in a colloquialism, right? Something to do with being tolerant and keeping an open mind. That would probably be a mantra for them right now, keeping an open mind, because they're in a new place and things have changed. And they haven't moved for a long time. They've done this semi-nomadic back and forth between the summer grounds and winter grounds, but her people have actually been where they are for quite some time, certainly for all of Shae's lifetime, but maybe even her parents' lifetime. So it's been a while since they've had to settle somewhere new. And it maybe was very common to them prior to that, but, well, it was. We talked about that. So, you know, that was really common to them before. Now they've kind of settled, and now all of a sudden they're not. They're not settled there anymore, and so they're finding their way back to what their ancestors did, I guess, of exploring a new place and learning it and making it a new home.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Okay, I want to focus now on the Hobbit families themselves, and just looking into, like, let's just say we took the average family of your little Hobbit community. First question I want to ask is, which I think is probably the best, who would do most of the chores and the cooking? Would there be any difference between men and women, or they will both all do the same thing? Would women also go out and hunt with the men?
I think everybody would do as according to their profession if they had one. It's like in Shae's household growing up, with her mom being the healer. Her mom was probably very, very busy, and her dad having the tavern. You know, he's having to harvest and brew. He has another space that has to be cleaned and maintained, and visitors coming and going all the time that are going to be doing that. So I think the kids and the family on a whole probably do, as far as the household itself, maintaining and cooking and doing those things, everybody would find their talent and do what they're good at. And I feel like they'd be like the dwarves in Snow White or whatever, right? Of like, you know, happy about their work, like whistle while you work kind of mentality. Of just, you know, this is what we need to do, and we do it together, and we survive. And then as far as men and women in hunting, yeah, I think anybody who was proficient would hunt, and gender would not. Gender's definitely not an issue in her tribe. Like anyone who has the skill, thus Shae being very much a hunter. She is a druid, and she cares about protecting the forest, and as a hunter, that's part of her calling. Like, you know, maintaining the herd sizes and being respectful and making sure that they never take more than they need.
How many kids would they have?
They'd all have big families. I think it'd be rare to see a family with less than 3 kids, and not unusual to see as many as 5 or 6. You need lots of kids to to keep everything going, which probably also means that they grow into a larger size than I was guessing at.
Well, I mean, also think for how long it takes for hobbits to have children, and then how long it takes for the children to grow up. I know hobbits need slower.
Kids might be a lot further apart because of that, and maybe they'd be in little groupings. Maybe they'd have 2 or 3, you know, in one age group, and maybe there'd be a big age gap, and there'd be 2 or 3 more, you know. Yeah. Maybe over their lifetime they'd have even more kids, maybe as many as 8.
Okay, how do they treat not the elders as in the leaders, but like say as an elder of the family, the grandparents, or the disabled?
They take care of their own, and when people are old to where they can't work and contribute in the labor and that anymore, then, you know, they would take care of them when they're moving and stuff. Of course, they would put them in wagons or put them on litters, or make sure they got the best mounts so that they can get where they're going. And they would have people who, probably the healers that Shae's mom trained, that would be watching over those people. They might even have homes for them where they could do that. And it would probably somewhat depend on their family as well. So assuming they still had a lot of family around them, their family would of course care for them as well. But to ensure that it's not a burden on the family, in order to do their work and do what needs to be done as a village, the healers would probably step in and do, and the children maybe would keep those people company, watch over them during the working hours. And they're not punching time clocks or anything, but they'd be out working during the day and stuff. So I think the young people and the healers would really watch over them.
Well, so what happens when they actually die? Do they bury? Do they have a big ceremony like we do, or?
I think they would have a ceremony honoring them. Now you stumped me. I'm a big fan of cremation. I think I see them being kind of agricultural and living off the land and moving. I don't think they would bury people, because then they'd have to abandon their burial grounds all the time. They'd always have that, even though her tribe hasn't moved for a really long time until now. I think they would have had that carryover from the days when they moved all the time. They were maybe more nomadic in the past, and now they're just semi-nomadic. So I think I could see them doing cremation, like having a big ceremony and praying to the spirits, and then having their remains go back to the land. And that makes sense for people who live off the land.
Yeah.
So now in their new home, that might change a little bit too, because there may be they may come up with some new traditions around burial.
If I were to come up to one of the basic families and I ask them, what are the most important things in life as a whole, what answer would they give me?
Family would be at the top of the list. Tribe, and the land.
Now, when I was explaining them in your story, I always had it to where they're always, having some event, some holiday, some sort of feast. So how long is the work day and work week? Is it something where they work like how we do today, 5 days a week? We're almost always tired, and even on the weekends we feel worn out? Or do they have kind of more of a different work schedule?
Well, I think when you live off the land, you have to work daylight hours, just like a farmer or anyone else. Hunters would probably adjust according to the prey that they're hunting, so there might be some nighttime activity there. Fishermen, anybody fishing the rivers and stuff would probably primarily work more, be doing that morning and evening, but they're probably not fishing every single day. You'd have a season and you'd dry the fish and stuff. So I see them working kind of typical daylight hours, but they're hobbits, so they're eating how many times a day?
Yeah.
They probably work very intensely while they're working at whatever it is they do. And they, I kind of imagine that, say, a couple of those crazy meals they have are probably eaten in the field, wherever it is that they're at. If it's her dad at the bar, he's probably with a tavern kind of situation. He's probably spending the earlier part of his day working on his brews and, you know, prepping the space, and then spending, of course, the evening actually, you know, cooking whatever's being offered that day on the menu, and actually serving and working. So, you know, obviously his hours would be very different than everybody else's, and he might not start his day as early as everybody else, which might mean that he does things to support his family and his household in the morning. So I think, like anything else we see in any society, I think there'd be a variety of work times, but I also think there'd be a fair degree of not having a lot of time off. But then some things might not involve as hard a work as others, if that makes sense. Like, you know, like with fishing, if you're fishing, you know, you're fishing in the morning and you're fishing in the evening when the fish are biting, and you're doing other things during the day. So I think there'd be a lot of kind of relaxed opportunities too. And maybe projects and things they do, there's probably a lot of seasonality to what they do. Again, thinking of farmers and hunters, you're not doing a lot of hunting in the winter when the game's not out.
Yeah.
You know, they follow the herd and they do what they can, but then they probably spend a lot of the winter, you know, tanning hides, and, you know, that's probably the prime time that anybody who's a tailor is sewing things together and making garments and other things that they need, packs and stuff like that. So I think like the Fletchers would probably be doing their work primarily in the winter too, and then doing repairs maybe more so in the heavy hunting months, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a variable answer. That one's a variable.
What sports or what do they do in their free time when they're having fun, or what do the kids play, or what is some of the contests that they want?
I think the kids do a lot of hide and seek and games. I picture them having a game maybe sort of like bocce ball, you know, which is sort of a bowling. It's sort of a bowling game if you ever see bocce played. We had talked a bit about, so Nate has these really cool birds that are mounts that my people ride, and they're sort of ostrich-like. They're called cuckoos, and ages ago, I kind of forgot we even had this conversation, but I had this vision that they play a version of polo on these cuckoos. And so they've got like their own, that's a big sport for them. Sometimes they make sport out of hunting itself. You actually stuck me in a kind of a competitive hunt with my brother-in-law when I first returned to the village after being out with the party for a while. So sometimes, and that's something Shae is very reserved about joining in on, because unless there's a need for it in the village for the meat, she doesn't like to hunt just for the sake of the hunt. Like, you know, she doesn't want to waste, you know, wildlife to that. So that's something she's kind of reserved about, but it's something that her people probably do. They probably have fishing contests. And they might I think they would make contests out of some of the daily chore kind of things too. Like if they're out planting things, they do definitely do some agriculture. And so anything that they're planting for themselves, you know, they might make a contest out of that.
I mean, hobbits are usually always shown to have like a really good green thumb, that they were blessed.
Yeah, growing is definitely one of their things. So, and they like tubers, as we all recall, potatoes.
Boiling mashed in a stew.
So, yeah, so I see some agriculture going on for sure. So they'd probably have some contests about who can plant the fastest and some things of that nature. Who can load the wagon the fastest.
Who can grow the biggest vegetables?
Making light of their work. Huh?
who can grow the biggest vegetables?
Yeah, probably at harvest time they probably have like contests about that.
So I have 3 more questions.
Okay.
One of them, what would be one of their major holidays?
Hmm. There'd be a huge one at the end of the harvest for
That's what I was
sure.
thinking, because they love food.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, food is always prominent for them, so I think at the end of the harvest definitely would be a big one. Um, I think they'd probably have another one in the spring around the first hunt, a big major hunt in the spring. Um, I don't know much about, I guess this is where you come in as the GM. Like, what other kinds of things are in your world, are prominent in this part of the world that they may or may not have adopted from other people or been exposed to?
Well, since you guys are so far up north, the winters are really long and hard. And I did kind of do a lot of my influence of the cultures up here from Norse mythologies. And one of them, they actually had something that's very similar to Christmas. And I forgot what it was called, but they would actually do all the little candles and the lightings because they would put it at the time where it was a winter solstice because they knew it was going to start getting lighter from there. And they were trying to make the darkest night of winter the lightest, trying to celebrate that they made it through. So maybe they can do something similar to that where they do all the lights and maybe a feast, a
Right.
time to, have true celebration in probably one of the darkest and hardest times of the year. And another thing, this also plays into one of the other questions I was going to ask you. Would they have a holiday celebrating when their greatest achievement as a race? And what would be their greatest achievement as a race? So a lot of times if you ask Americans, we're going to be like, oh, we won the Civil War, we became independent, and now we're the free country of the brave and the blah, 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 blah. It goes from there. You ask Italians,
Right.
it's a whole different war. So what would be a great turning point for their people?
So, okay, so thinking about that, I think for them it would be arriving at their new home. And so maybe they'd even have a few like that are like from different times that they've moved in their culture. But this home has been the home they just left has been such a long time home for them. I see maybe 2 or 3
Holidays
generations
like that?
there, right? Maybe
Yeah.
maybe 2 or 3 generations in basically that one area. So maybe they'd have something for when they arrived there. And I guess you and I might have to talk about when that might have been. So like to place it in a year.
In a timeline event, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I almost see them having things that are very nature oriented. So the solstice makes sense, but maybe even full moon cycles or something.
That'd be a good thing to also keep up with, especially because there's 2 moons. So maybe there's a time when they're both full that you see one from the other. That'd be like a really big event, or maybe other astronomical
Right.
events such as a reappearing comet that will come by a lot.
Right. Or
Um,
an eclipse or something.
yeah, or maybe it's just a certain weather patterns that you generally don't see a whole lot could be a big thing to them. Maybe like the first snow or one of the very first rainfalls of the spring. I can imagine things such as that being a very big deal. Also, another thing
Right.
that could be really big too is the birth of their livestock. I'm not
Yeah.
sure how your people treat their livestock, and I'm just gonna guess that it's not like they see them as slaves or as like you're my animal, I command you. That's more of a partnership, a symbiotic relationship. So I can imagine even then, maybe like a birth of a white cockatoo would be a big deal to them, and they just go
Right.
crazy over it for no real reason.
Right. I think that hobbits liking to eat as much as they do, I think any little thing, a birth in a family,
Oh
whether
yeah.
it's an animal or another hobbit child, would be something. I think even burials are, well, not burials. We talked about them being more cremations, but I think those
Celebrations of life.
celebrations too. See them definitely being more, they'd be sorrowful, and I think the initial part of the ceremony would be somber, but I think I kind of envision them like maybe even singing the sparks as they float into the air right? Having some sort of song that maybe starts out somber and becomes joyful because it's moving on to another existence. I see, I see them having a positive outlook on just about everything, and then having a huge feast, right? Maybe a feast that goes through the whole night. And now that I think about it, I think too, like you were talking about winter solstice, so longest night, I could see them partying through the night and eating constantly and drinking and, rabble rousing through the whole night, maybe. Especially if it coincides with like a moon or something. But cool. I think celebrating it as part of nature that they have to deal with, and meaning that they're halfway through winter or something, whatever it is. For us, of course, for us, the solstice is really the beginning of winter. Like our first day of winter is always just right around the top, it's right there.
Yeah, that's when it basically starts.
Yeah, as opposed to, although I think we all mentally think of winter as being in November, and I feel like spring, we're already starting to think of spring when technically, the spring date hasn't come yet. So, but I think they'd be more centered.
Like that way for the Norse, because, or especially up here, just because winter does really start much earlier. It gets really cold, and I think even then they technically divided it differently because we have our months due to the Roman calendar, which is kind of funky. Mm-hmm. But so for them, winter was a huge deal because there's no crop growth. They relied on how much food they have left in their stowaways, and if they had to, that's also the reason why they raided, because they really did live in a really bad area. I'm not saying that all people up there raided. That's a big misconception. They're all savages. There was a lot of farmers, but it was very dangerous. It's very hard. And that's the reason why they did celebrate halfway through, the winter, quote unquote. But let's just call it the halfway through when the days are getting really long and cold.
Right.
And very dark and cold.
I just thought of something else too. I think they would ice fish.
Oh yeah, definitely.
They would ice fish. They would maybe go up into the well, it probably depend on what happens. Like this year, here at my own house, we have a lake that we overlook, and that lake almost never freezes. Like it freezes a little bit this winter, like from December when we got our first snow all the way through just a couple weeks ago. It was frozen. Like you could see It was frozen. And that's really unusual. So maybe that's, they have a lake. We talked about them being like right on a lake and a river. And so maybe when that freezes, maybe they make a big deal of, it's frozen enough. There's a celebration, right? We go ice fishing. and it's one of the ways they can, continue to support their great eating habits. So
I'm gonna go over something really quickly too. Sorry to cut you off. Another thing that's really important that I generally tell people to ask about is thinking about their gods and their effect on the people. Which is for time's sake, I'll explain how, because I already talked to Shae about hers. This is one of the very first things that they actually, as a community, believe in, that there's many gods to follow. Am I correct with that?
Yes.
There's not just one patron god.
Druid does.
Oh, what do your people then believe as what would be their main god?
The people would put me on the spot. The people probably do have as a village, they probably don't have a single religion, but different ones probably have different gods that they follow. I'm looking for the sheet you gave me on all the gods.
Maybe Gaia, perhaps, because that's their creator as far as
Yeah, Gaia would be. Yes, that's true. I forgot that. We talked about that. Gaia would probably be a really big one for them.
Or Bacchus as well.
Huh?
Bacchus and Apollo.
Bacchus and Apollo, who I've forgotten what theirs are.
Bacchus is the well, I hate saying this, so I know it's definitely wrong, but he's technically the god of wine, partying, and health. And Apollo was not only just a sun god, but he's also a god of life, story, and prophecy.
Yeah,
so it's very singing and.
Then the hunters probably follow. I forgot his name again. Um, I keep forgetting their names. This is like I struggle with names.
Me too.
Um, shoot, he's one of Shae's that Shae follows. Is it Sylvanas?
Sylvanas? He's like the tree god. I know that.
He's not
There's
on
also
your list.
yeah. I was gonna say I'm adding more, but
I think it's Sylvanas, or was it Malor?
Malor was the one that you said was more hunty.
Malor. Um, you have him as patron to the night, though. So I might need to reread the list of gods you gave us, and I might need to reassign some of them.
That's
But
totally
yeah,
fine.
I think the agriculture people would probably worship Amatros, wouldn't they?
Yeah, definitely. He is
And
god of the
Gaia.
sow.
Yeah,
And
you know what?
Gaia,
Gaia's probably the main one because she's the goddess of Earth, and so that makes total sense. So maybe the majority of the village would follow Gaia, and then there might be people. Any druids like Shae would probably have multiple gods that they follow in addition to Gaia.
well, would
And
that change though? Now that they're technically on Amatros's island per se.
I mean, I think it's already been changing. They, I think I remember several sessions before we even left that you had mentioned that some of the village was starting to pray to Amatros already. So I think it would definitely change, especially when they arrive in this new home and their needs are being met and things are happening. And so far, I don't think there's been any major tragedy as a result of the move. So I think they'd be thankful to Amatros, and they'd be probably making some transition there. I don't think they'd forsake Gaia though. They're not the kind of people who are going to be like, I don't like you anymore. You know, they're not.
No, of course not.
Right, because of their
because at least in my games, Gaia is literally Amatros's technically mother.
Right. Which I guess then leads us to, I think I just actually ended up going back on my own statement of that. I said Shae would probably be the only one that followed multiple gods, but really maybe not. I mean, I've always envisioned them as more like a Native American people who, my understanding is, they pray to the spirits of the different things that they, if they kill an animal, they pray to the spirit of the animal, thanking it for the sacrifice. They pray to the, and I'm not Native American, and I'm only basing this on books I've read that were fiction, so I may not even be accurate, but I've always loved that idea. They've got like the Great Spirit, and then they've got, like the spirit of the wolf, and the spirit, they've got the, the spider, that's like the weaver of the world, and it probably all varies by tribe too, but I always loved that kind of reverence for the earth and praying to the spirits of those different things, giving thanks or making requests and different things. So I do see them as kind of doing that because, again, that's how they live. So it makes sense that their primary religion, if you will, would be to not follow a specific god, but rather to follow, to pray to what makes sense for what they're doing in the moment. So, and there's something literally in the player handbook about that with druids specifically. And again, that made sense to me for that very reason, but maybe her whole tribe is like that. Maybe other tribes of hobbits aren't. Maybe other tribes have a more urban culture or a culture that's centered more around a specific thing. Like, maybe there's some that live on the coast that are primarily fishermen and, sailors or something, and maybe they have a more specific religion. But her people doing what they do and being nomadic, I think they're more open and more varied.
So, last question I want to ask you is, as a group, what is their greatest flaw? What would really bring them down if they didn't fix?
I think they're too trusting because they are so friendly and they want to be friendly to everybody and welcoming. So I think it makes them vulnerable to people who would take advantage.
Hmm.
I think the other thing would be, we touched on this a little bit when we talked about it the other day, and that is that they don't have an army. They don't have specific guard people. They have their hunters, and the hunters have always been enough to protect the village, but they've got this hospitality thing, so they're always welcoming of people. But if somebody came in and there was a siege or something, they'd probably trouble there because they don't have an army, they don't have a protective force. And I think this is one of the things we explored. Nate and I had a conversation the other day, and we were really exploring how their new home is going to come together. And I think that's probably one of the big ways and it's probably going to be heavily influenced by some of the other people that come and live on this island with them, is that they're going to bring that skill and start to train her people. And it may be some of the really, really amazing hunters with a lot of experience that maybe are part of that. But I think that's going to have to change. If you're having a lot of people coming and going on a larger basis than you ever had before, ships coming in and having shiploads of people and crew members and stuff, and people coming to live there, you're going to start to have a lot more a diversity of personalities, and that's going to inevitably lead to need for law, and there's going to be law breaking, and that's something that they probably didn't have a lot of in their old home. Because as much as they had visitors, they didn't really have people coming and staying to live with them before. They had people that spent a night or two on their travels. And now they're going to have people who are literally becoming part of their community. And it's no longer their community. It's now this broader spectrum. So...
Is there any other things you'd like to go over of your people, or do you think we have a pretty good idea right now of how they really are? At least a rough skeletal design for them.
Yeah, I think we've got a pretty well fleshed out people. We know what they do, we know how they survive, we know how they live, we know how they grow, and we even know, how they marry, sort of.
Which most importantly, I know how that works. So when she goes in and she is a player and she's running through my world, if she comes across her people, I can accurately, for the most part, play it without just completely butchering her backstory. And then she gets to explore something she's kind of created, which is really cool. And this is one of the things I mentioned. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching how I do it and how this all kind of runs down when you're creating a people. Let your player's imagination roam free, so to speak.
Definitely. And Nate's really good at using it in games, so make sure that you do that, because that's what really makes it all worthwhile and makes it come to life for me, as depicting Shae.
It's really funny. It's like when there's people that create a whole lot for their backstory and like none of it ever gets used. It's like, oh man, come on.
Yeah. I spent all that time. Where'd it go? Why did I do that if you weren't going to use it? So, yeah. If you have anything to add, questions you want to ask, or if you want to share about how you've done similar things in your games.
Or done it better.
Share in the comments below. Or what?
Yeah. Or if you guys done it better. If you have a better way of doing it, let us know.
Yeah, we want to know. So.
All right. Well, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed our kind of rambling going on about this. It's definitely fun to make. I always love listening to my players. I hope you join our little Dargon family. And
until next time, get out and get gaming.
Bye-bye.
Bye.